Hey, old man, you missed a spot. Or are your eyes as useless as that mop? The sound of a heavy, expensive boot hitting a plastic bucket echoed through the empty executive lobby. Arthur didn't flinch. He kept his head down, his chin tucked into the collar of the oversized, scratchy blue jumpsuit. He squeezed a mop handle, feeling the familiar calluses on his palms. Calluses he hadn't felt in 40 years, not since he was a kid hauling crates on the docks. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling," Arthur rasped. He kept his voice low, gravelly, and tired. He didn't look up at Hollis. Hollis stood there in a $3,000 suit that Arthur's hard work had paid for. He was holding a glass of scotch, his face flushed with a kind of arrogance that only comes from unknown power. "It's Hollis to you, Janitor. Mr. Sterling is for people who actually matter in this building." Hollis sneered. He deliberately tipped his glass, letting a slow, amber stream of scotch puddle onto the freshly waxed floor. "Clean it up, and do it fast. I have a meeting in 5 minutes that's going to change the face of this company forever." Arthur watched the liquid spread. A year ago, he had sat in the chair Hollis now occupied. He had built Sterling Global from a single laptop in a garage. But 6 months ago, he had told the board he was taking a permanent sabbatical to travel the world. In reality, he hadn't left the city. He had moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment across from the docks and spent 4 weeks learning how to disappear. He had hired a professional makeup artist to age his face, adding deep lines and a sallow, sickly tint to his skin. He wore a gray, thinning wig and contact lenses that made his sharp blue eyes look cloudy and dim. To the world, Arthur Sterling was on a yacht in the Mediterranean. To the staff at Sterling Global, he was just Silas, the new night shift janitor who was too old for the job. "Of course, sir," Arthur muttered, dropping to his knees to soak up the scotch with a rag. "Good boy," Hollis said, stepping over Arthur's hand. As Hollis walked toward the boardroom, he pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't know that the janitor had placed a high-gain directional microphone inside the base of the nearby decorative plant. "Is the buyer ready?" Hollis said into the phone, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Yeah, I've got the proprietary code. Once the merger goes through, the old man's shares will be diluted to nothing. He'll be a billionaire on paper and a pauper in reality. And Sloane? Don't worry about my wife. I've already started the paperwork to have her declared mentally unfit. The stress of her father's disappearance is taking quite a toll on her, you see." Arthur's hand tightened around the wet rag until his knuckles turned white. His daughter. Hollis wasn't just stealing the company. He was planning to bury Sloane in an institution to keep her quiet. Hollis disappeared into the boardroom, slamming the double doors behind him. Arthur stood up, his back cracking. He wasn't Silas the janitor anymore. He was the predator. He reached into his jumpsuit and pulled out a small, encrypted tablet. He tapped the screen, and the live audio from the boardroom began to bleed into his earpiece. "Gentlemen," he heard Hollis say, "let's discuss the price of my father-in-law's soul." Arthur was about to move toward the door when he heard a different set of footsteps, light, hurried, and heavy with exhaustion. He quickly went back to scrubbing the baseboards. Sloane walked into the lobby. She looked pale. Her hair, usually a perfect blonde bob, was pulled back in a messy knot. She was clutching a stack of files, her eyes red from what looked like days of crying. She stopped when she saw the old man on the floor. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft and broken. "I didn't mean to get in your way." "It's okay, miss," Arthur whispered, his heart breaking at the sound of her grief. Sloane sat down on a nearby bench, burying her face in her hands. "It's all falling apart," she whispered to herself, not realizing the janitor was listening. "Dad, where are you? Why did you leave me with him?" Arthur wanted to drop the mop. He wanted to pull off the wig and the fake skin and tell her he was right here. But he knew if he moved too soon, Hollis would vanish with the encrypted codes and Sloane would never be safe. He had to stay Silas a little longer. "You look like you need a coffee, miss," Arthur said, staying in character. Sloane looked up, surprised that the help was speaking to her. She gave him a weak, Sad smile. That's very kind of you, Silas. But I don't think even a gallon of coffee can fix this. Sometimes the darkest hour is just before the dawn, Arthur said. Sloane blinked. She looked at him closely, her brow furrowed. My father used to say that. Before Arthur could respond, the boardroom doors swung open. Hollis stepped out, looking triumphant. He saw Sloane, and his face immediately shifted into a mask of fake concern. Sloane, darling, what are you doing here? You should be at home resting. You know what the doctor said about your episodes. I'm fine, Hollis, she said, her voice hardening. I was looking for the quarterly projections. They are missing from the server. Hollis laughed, a cold, oily sound. You probably just misplaced them. Again. Go home. Honey, I'll have the driver take you. He turned to Arthur, his eyes flickering with annoyance. Janitor, I told you to clean the lobby, not chat with my wife. Get out of here before I have you fired. Arthur bowed his head. Yes, sir. Sorry, Sal. He grabbed his bucket and began to walk away. But as he passed Hollis, he accidentally bumped into him sliding a tiny, adhesive GPS tracker onto the underside of Hollis's expensive leather belt. Watch it, you old fool. Hollis barked. Arthur didn't answer. He turned the corner into the supply closet and locked the door. He sat down on a crate of bleach, pulled out his tablet, and watched the red dot on the screen begin to move. You want to play the villain Hollis. Arthur whispered, his real voice returning, cold, sharp, and deadly. Then let's play. But remember, I'm the one who knows where all the bodies are buried in this building, because I'm the one who dug the holes. He tapped a command on the tablet. Across the city, in a secure vault, a silent alarm began to glow red. The Real Arthur Sterling was back, and he was starting with the trash. The supply closet was cramped, smelling of industrial lemon and stale air, but to Arthur it was a war room. He sat on a stack of floor wax boxes, the blue jumpsuit sleeves pushed up to reveal a high-end smartwatch that didn't match his Silas persona. On the screen, he watched Hollis pacing in the executive office, oblivious to the fact that his every word was being broadcast to a man sitting 10 feet away in a closet. Where's the file, Sloane? Hollis's voice boomed through Arthur's earpiece. I saw it on the desk an hour ago. Now the drive is empty. Arthur leaned back, a cold smile touching his lips. He had used his master key to slip into the office while Hollis was in the restroom, replacing the encrypted merger documents with a loop of Arthur's own voice saying, Integrity is the only currency that matters. I didn't touch it, Hollis. Sloane's voice was trembling near the point of breaking. I told you, I'm just trying to help. You're not helping. You're losing it. Just like your father. Hollis spat. Arthur heard a sharp thud, Hollis slamming his fist onto the desk. The sound made Arthur's blood boil. He stood up, grabbed his mop bucket, and stepped out into the hallway. It was time to rattle the cage. He didn't knock. He simply pushed the heavy office door open and started mopping the entryway, his head down, the plastic wheels of the bucket squeaking loudly against the silence of the room. Get out! Hollis screamed, spinning around. I didn't call for cleaning. Arthur didn't stop. He pushed the mop back and forth, the rhythmic swish thump filling the room. The bin, sir, it's overflowing. Can't have a clean office with a dirty bin. I said get out, you old rat. Hollis marched over, his face purple with rage. He grabbed the mop handle, trying to jerk it out of Arthur's hands. Arthur didn't let go. For a split second, he allowed his cloudy contact lenses to lock onto Hollis's eyes with a piercing, predatory intensity. The strength in Arthur's grip was far beyond that of a 70-year-old janitor. Hollis froze. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sudden, inexplicable sense of recognition that he couldn't quite place. I told you to leave. Funny thing about trash, Mr. Hollis, Arthur rasped, his voice dropping an octave. You think you've thrown it away, but it always is a way of coming back to the surface, especially the things that stink the most. Arthur let go of the mop. Hollis stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own designer rug. "What did you say to me?" Hollis whispered, his voice shaking. "The bin, sir. It's empty now," Arthur said, his posture slumping back into the frail Silas persona. He grabbed his bucket and began to wheel it out. "Have a productive afternoon. The investors are waiting in the lobby. They look impatient." As Arthur exited, he saw Sloane standing by the window. She was staring at him, her eyes wide. She had seen the moment of strength. She had seen the way the janitor stood his ground. "Silas," she called out softly. Arthur didn't look back. He couldn't. If he saw the hope in her eyes, he would break cover too soon. "Just doing my job, Miss Sterling." In the lobby, the three lead investors for the merger, men Arthur had known for decades, were sitting on the leather sofas, looking at their watches. They were sharks. They didn't care about Hollis. They only cared about the Sterling IP. Arthur walked past them, whistling a low, mournful tune. It was a song he used to hum in the boardroom when a deal was about to go south. One of the investors, an old fox named Miller, looked up sharply. He frowned, his eyes following the hunchback of the janitor as he disappeared into the server's elevator. "Did you hear that?" Miller asked the others. "That song. It sounded just like Arthur," another replied. "But that's impossible. He's in Ibiza." Inside the elevator, Arthur tapped his tablet. He had just disabled the building's internal servers. To the outside world, Sterling Global was now dark. No emails, no transfers, no merger. He arrived at the basement level, the heart of the building's electrical system. He knew that in exactly 5 minutes, Hollis would try to present the stolen code to the investors. He also knew that the presentation was stored on a local server that Arthur was currently holding in his hand. He sat down on a concrete step, the shadows of the basement swallowing him. He pulled a small burner phone from his pocket and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. "This is Arthur Sterling," he said into the phone, his real voice echoing off the cold walls. "Empty the offshore accounts. Every cent. By the time the sun goes down, Hollis won't even have enough money to pay for the taxi to jail." Suddenly, the basement door creaked open. A sliver of light cut through the dark. "I knew it," a voice whispered. Arthur turned. Standing at the top of the stairs, clutching a flashlight, was Sloane. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked like a woman who had finally found the missing piece of a puzzle. "Dad!" The basement was silent, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete and the weight of 30 years of secrets. Arthur looked up at Sloane. For a second, he wasn't the powerful CEO or the invisible janitor. He was just a father caught in a lie. "Sloane," he whispered, his real voice cracking. She ran down the steps, the flashlight beam dancing wildly against the walls. She didn't stop until she was inches from him, staring at the fake lines on his face and the cheap blue fabric of his jumpsuit. She reached out, her thumb brushing against the edge of his gray wig. "You let me believe you were gone," she said, her voice a mix of relief and a sharpening anger. "You let Hollis treat me like a lunatic while you played dress-up in the basement." "I had to know, Sloane," Arthur said, standing up and shedding the Silas slouch. He stood tall, looking like the man who had built the skyline outside. "If I had come back as Arthur Sterling, Hollis would have hidden the evidence. He would have played the perfect son-in-law until I died, and then he would have destroyed you. I had to let him think he'd won so he'd show me exactly where he hid the knife." Above them, a muffled thud echoed. Hollis was likely losing his mind as the server stayed dark. "He's selling the company today, Dad," Sloane said, wiping a stray tear. "The investors are upstairs. They are signing the dilution papers in 20 minutes. "No," Arthur said, his eyes turning to cold flint. "They are attending a funeral. They just don't know it yet." Arthur grabbed a black duffel bag from behind the electrical transformer. He pulled out a crisp, tailored suit, the one he'd been keeping for this exact moment. He didn't need the makeup anymore. He stripped the wig off and wiped the sallow tint from his skin with a chemical cloth. "Go upstairs," Arthur commanded. "Wait for the moment he asks for the final vote. I'll do the rest." The boardroom was a pressure cooker. Hollis was sweating through his $3,000 shirt, his hands trembling as he hovered over a laptop that refused to connect to the network. The three investors sat like statues, their patience evaporated. "Technology glitch, gentlemen," Hollis stammered, his eyes darting to the door. "My IT team is working on it, but the physical contracts are right here. We don't need the server to sign the transfer of power." Miller, the oldest investor, leaned forward. "Hollis, we're here because of Arthur's legacy. Without his proprietary code and his signature, this company is just a pile of glass and steel. You assured us you had full power of attorney." "I do," Hollis shouted, perhaps a bit too loudly. He shoved a stack of papers toward Miller. "Sloane has already initialed the witness lines. She's not herself today, but the law is the law." Sloane walked into the room then. She didn't look like the broken woman from an hour ago. She walked to the head of the table and stood behind her chair. "I won't be initialing anything, Hollis," she said clearly. Hollis turned, a snarl forming on his lips. "Sloane, get out. We talked about this. You're having an episode. Go to the car." "The only one having an episode, Hollis, is you," Sloane replied. "You're trying to sell a house that doesn't belong to you." "I'm the CEO." Hollis screamed, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. "The founder is gone. He's probably dead in a ditch in Europe for all we know. I am the only one left to lead." "Is that right?" The voice didn't come from Sloane. It came from the back of the room. The double doors swung open, and the janitor walked in. But he wasn't wearing the blue jumpsuit. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Hollis's car. His hair was silver. His eyes were piercing blue, and he carried a presence that made the air in the room feel thin. The investors stood up as if pulled by invisible strings. "Arthur!" Miller gasped. Hollis's face went from purple to a sickly, chalky white. He collapsed back into his chair, his mouth hanging open like a landed fish. "No, you're in Ibiza. I checked the flight logs. I saw the credit card charges." "You saw what I wanted you to see, Hollis," Arthur said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. He didn't look at the investors. He kept his eyes locked on his son-in-law. "I've been here the whole time. I've been cleaning your floors. I've been emptying your trash. And I've been listening to every single word you said about my daughter." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. He laid it in the center of the table. "Would you like to hear the part where you discuss dating my daughter to steal her chaise?" Arthur asked. "Or perhaps the part where you offered to sell Miller here a backdoor into our security encryption for an extra $10 million under the table?" Miller's head snapped toward Hollis, his eyes turning predatory. "You did what?" "His lying!" Hollis shrieked, scrambling to his feet. "He's been gone. He's mentally unstable. I'm the CEO." "You were the CEO," Arthur corrected. He leaned over the table, his face inches from Hollis's. "But I just checked the bylaws. A CEO can be removed for gross negligence and criminal intent by a majority vote of the primary shareholder." Arthur looked at Sloane. Then he looked at the investors. "I am the primary shareholder," Arthur whispered, "and I vote to cast out the trash." Security guards, the real ones, the ones Arthur had personally rehired an hour ago, burst into the room. "Hollis Vance," Arthur said, using the man's full name for the first time. "You have 5 minutes to clear your desk, but you won't need your car keys. The police are waiting in the garage. It turns out selling company secrets is a federal offense." As a guard grabbed Hollis's arms, the younger man began to sob, his arrogance dissolving into a pathetic, high-pitched wail. He looked at Sloane, pleading. She just turned her back on him and looked out the window at the city her father had built. Arthur sat down in his old chair. He looked at the investors, who were now trying to look as if they hadn't been about to rob him blind 10 minutes ago. "Now," Arthur said, his voice returning to its calm, boardroom authority, "let's discuss the future of Sterling Global. And this time, we're going to do it with the lights on." The sirens had faded, and the executive floor of Sterling Global was quiet. Not the heavy, fearful silence of Hollis's reign, but a hollow, ringing stillness. Arthur stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, looking out at the city. He was back in his charcoal suit, but he kept rubbing his palms together, feeling for the calluses he'd owed to Silas. Sloane stood in the doorway. She hadn't moved to her desk. She hadn't called her lawyer. She just watched him. "You knew for months," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a wire. "You didn't go to Ibiza. You didn't go anywhere. You were in the city, watching me crumble." Arthur turned. "I was watching him. Sloane. I had to see how far he would go. He went to my doctors. Dad. He had them writing scripts for nerve stabilizers that made my head feel like it was filled with cotton. I thought I was losing my mind. I called your private cell 100 times, screaming for help, and you were downstairs mopping the lobby." Arthur took a step toward her, his face softening, but Sloane stepped back. "I was the one who authorized the surveillance," Arthur admitted, his voice dropping. "I saw the doctors. I knew the pills were fake. I had the janitor swap them for vitamins weeks ago. You weren't losing your mind, Sloane. You were never in danger." Sloane froze. Her eyes went wide. "You let me think I was going crazy. You let me live in that terror just to build a legal case." "It's how empires are saved," Arthur said, his jaw tightening. "If I had stepped in early, he would have walked away with a settlement in half your shares. Now, he's going to prison for 20 years. You're safe. The company is safe." "The company is safe," Sloane repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her. "That's always the bottom line, isn't it?" She walked over to his desk and picked up the small, weathered photo of her mother that Arthur had kept there for decades. She looked at it for a long time, then set it face down on the mahogany. "Hollis was a snake," she said quietly. "But at least I knew what he wanted. He wanted the money. I don't know what you want anymore. Dad, you played the ghost so well that I think the father I knew actually died." "I did it for you," Arthur insisted. "No," Sloane said, looking him dead in the eye. "You did it for the win. You wanted to see the look on his face when you took the glasses off. You wanted the grand reveal. You turned my life into a script so you could play the hero at the end." She turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" Arthur asked. "I'm taking a sabbatical," she said, mocking his own words. "A real one. I'm going to find a place where people don't wear masks and where floors are just floors." "Sloane, wait. The board needs a chairperson. You're the only one I trust." Sloane stopped at the threshold. She didn't look back. "Then I guess you'll have to keep mopping, Silas, because I'm done cleaning up your mess." The door clicked shut. Arthur sat down in his massive leather chair. He looked at the empty lobby on his security feed. He saw his daughter walk out of the building, her head held high, not glancing back once at the glass tower. He reached into his desk and pulled out the old blue janitor's cap. He turned it over in his hands. He had caught the villain. He had saved the billions. He had won the war. But as he looked at the door his daughter had just walked through, he realized he was the only one left to witness his victory. He had spent his life building a legacy for Sloane, only to realize that in protecting the empire, he had destroyed the heir. He stood up, walked to the window, and pressed the blue cap against the glass, looking out at the city lights. To the world below, he was a powerful Arthur Sterling, back from the dead. As he looked at the door his daughter had just walked through, he knew she was angry now, but he also knew that one day she would understand. He had let her feel the cold so she would appreciate the sun. He had stayed in the shadows so he could drag her back into the light. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city he built. To the world below, he was a powerful Arthur Sterling, back from the dead. He had proven that no matter how deep the snakes hide, the king always sees them coming. He had protected his legacy, protected his blood, and shown the world that Arthur Sterling never stops watching over his own. Sometimes, a father has to become a stranger to save his child. Arthur Sterling didn't just clean the floors. He cleaned out the corruption that was threatening to destroy his family. He took the hard road, the lonely road, but he did it for the only thing that matters. A real leader does whatever it takes to protect those they love. What do you think? Was Arthur a hero for the way he handled Hollis? I think he was a masterclass in justice. Drop a yes in the comments if you think Arthur did the right thing. If you love seeing justice served and the good guys winning, hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm we want more stories of strength and truth. And to make sure you're here for every epic reveal, subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on good stories. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.